The whole thing with trauma is fairly new. It's fairly recent in our history to really understand, what happens when we have to adapt to a traumatic situation. And the good news, even in shamanism, there's ways to do shamanic healing with something like that. I'll give you one example. Another avenue to go is something called soul loss. Interesting word, isn't it? Or two words. It's fairly common, across cultures, is that an aspect of your soul leaves when you're traumatized.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Purple Stars podcast. Happy 2025. I couldn't be happier to kickstart our new year with this episode. Our guest today is a world-renowned author, psychotherapist, teacher, shamanic practitioner, and such a wise soul. So I'm very grateful that we can tap into his wisdom. Please welcome Dr. Stephen Farmer.
Well, thank you very much, Sarah, and Happy New Year to you and everyone else who's listening.
Stephen, I am so excited for this episode because for so many reasons. And the very first one is you are one of the people that connects for, how can I say, for some people, psychotherapy and then shamanic healing, for example, are like opposites. So I love that you incorporate everything and that people can see how holistic healing can happen. And so I'm very, very, very grateful. And I wanted to ask you before we get started, for those who don't know you yet, can you share a little bit about your journey and what has led you become the person you are today? And I'm particularly curious, all the passions you have for psychotherapy, shamanic healing, and all the other practices. Have you had this ever since, you were a little child, or did this passion find you along the way?
Well, I think if you talk to a number of healers and spiritual teachers or just teachers, you'll find that they had a messed up childhood, in certain ways. Let's say a challenging childhood. And as much as I believe me, I've done a lot of work with this just to clear, and, I just so appreciate the things about my mother and father that they did provide. And on the dark side is it was an alcoholic family. So all the things that go with it, down in the 70s especially, there was a lot of discovery about alcoholic families and the effect it has and such like that. And I think I came in or prepared even in childhood to become an acute observer of human behavior. I had to,
Mm-hmm.
because you never knew when. Forgive me, Father, but my dad would come in the door and I'd smell the alcohol and I went, oh, here we go. And so I would retreat. I learned to, in a sense, kind of dissociate, from
Mm-hmm.
that so that I could feel safe. It's a lot of times we don't think about dissociation as a means of providing safety, but it is. Stephen Porges in a fascinating theory called polyvagal theory that he has talked about and written about, that's one of the ways, even to pass out,
Mm-hmm.
is a way to be safe. Anyway, so that formed, or let me put it this way: I think we come in with a certain amount of genetic material and spiritual material, etc. That karma, sometimes it's called, to use that word, to bring that in, that sets us up for our life's destiny and our life's path. So that was kind of a general way I think it prepared me to be a really good observer of human behavior. So then it was I was a jock. I played football in college and went on to play rugby after. I loved rugby. But let me get to the meat of the story, the heart of the story. The meat of the story. That's funny. But the heart of the yeah, I know. Thank you. Thanks for laughing. um, the I didn't really feel like I feel like I was led in a way without being consciously aware of it. And I suspect that a lot of people feel that way, and until ultimately at some point you you experience the initial stages of an awakening process. What that means to me is that you become aware of something greater, higher self, source, God, the number of names, that can be uh, just used to describe that force, that guides us and leads us and calls us, etc. So it took a while, into my 20s before I realized, there was something, something bigger going on. I wasn't sure, that there was a God. I even told my parents that one time, I don't know if there's a God or not. My mother got very upset. I remember that. And my dad, God bless him, all he said was, Pat, my mother's name, Pat, it's okay. Someday he'll understand, you know,
Mm-hmm.
that thread of wisdom that was in there. I don't know if that's what he meant, but I went, I got it. Anyway,
Mm-hmm.
let me abbreviate this a little bit, Sarah. I was drawn to psychology and psychotherapy naturally, as you can just from the story I've shared so far. And I really liked it because it looked like, not looked like, but I experienced success, that people were getting better. I learned a lot from the initial years of doing that. I trained at Chapman University, now Chapman University, got my master's, went on to get my doctoral later. It took a while, it took a few years before I went back to school and took my doctorate, etc. And just the development of that is I acquired a number of skills. I would call them people skills. I really felt like I had to learn how to be um, how to be a human.
Wow.
Yeah, how to be the best human I could be. And what I mean by that, Sarah, is I always felt a little awkward. I'm more introverted, you know. If you think about what I just said about the story, that was my safety, is to withdraw. So I had to learn to come out and to be social, to engage, etc. But there was always a part of me that I would hold back. Like I got to be careful about these other human beings. You never know.
Mm-hmm.
That kind of
Mm-hmm.
thing. Kind of like not being on edge so much as just be ready, in case. So anyway, to make a long story even longer, when I got my doctorate, I got into some very interesting things, and I think I found um, trauma and what happens to us when we are traumatized to be so immensely valuable. In my course of study and learning about myself and the traumatic residuals, if you will, the effects, the consequences of trauma. And more importantly, Sarah, what's really cool these days is there are methodologies that help us heal from the wounds of trauma. That is just
Mm-hmm.
so, it gives me chills to say that. And I feel so grateful, that we have this. We have EMDR, eye movement desensitization and reprocessing, which I'm certified in, which is basically using eyeballs to, you help somebody by, I would wave like if I was working with you, I might wave my fingers back and forth and say, just follow my fingers as you're thinking about the trauma. Somatic experiencing, 3-year training in that and certified in that. That was like, oh, that was like a major, major revelation. The whole process. Simply put, the that trauma stays in the body. So we start working with the body in a certain way, which I don't think there's time to really go into it. Basically, though, that you learn to freeze, you learn to dissociate. It's not like you try to, you're consciously aware of it, but it stays sort of stuck in the body. And the job of the therapist or the healer is to be able to help that freeze thaw.
Mm-hmm.
Just it's just amazing, and I love it so much. And plus, I don't think in Western civilization that we forget we have a body. That, and again, maybe it's just this mass dissociative process. I don't know, but it brings us back to attention to the body and how much the body can teach us.
Mm-hmm.
I say the body. So yeah, there's a little bit of distancing, and observing in that. I don't just say my body. I think it's the body. Or I know, like when we die, it's like you don't die, the body dies.
Mm-hmm.
So kind of think about it that way. But more importantly, with the somatic experiencing, it's to be able to unfreeze this frozen energy, that stays in the body. It's great stuff. And then I went, okay, I'm restless. There's something else here. And then about 30 years ago, I read a book called Way of the Shaman by
Mhm.
Michael Harner. Blew me away. I went, this is it. And I just, there was something, some divine timing to it too. I was ready for something to augment what all the training that I'd done in the various modalities, including EMDR and somatic experiencing, trauma recovery, family therapy. Technically, I'm a marriage, family, and child therapist, state of California. I just say licensed psychotherapist because that's allowed, and it says more, I think. Um, I went to a 2-day seminar, and I'm so grateful. It was with Michael Harner, the author of the book. And I'm sure there's some listeners here that go, I know that, or I've been there, been there, done that, or I read the book, because I believe, firmly believe, and that he is the one individual who is largely responsible for bringing into contemporary society very powerful shamanic methodologies. And the number one is to be able to stay attuned to the realm of spirits so that you have guides and helpers that will work with you in doing any shamanic healing. So, Sarah, I shot out of that 2 day. I went up to Michael. I said, feel like Bugs Bunny or something. Michael, what else can I do now? What can I do? Almost like he didn't say this, but it was almost like, whoa, boy, wait, hold on. But that's me. When I find something that I know is going to be not only helpful for myself, but absolutely as a healer, as a teacher, and those two words describe my purpose. And then the guise or the clothing that I wear has changed over time. But the 2 day just really set me on fire. And so he had to slow me down. He said, no, you can't do the 3-year program yet. He didn't say it that way, but so he sent me to Esalen, where there was a 1 week experience, and then some other teachers that had graduated from his program. So I was just gobbling up, various trainings in shamanism and influences from different culture. Celtic shamanism, for instance, which was lost along the way. When the killings took place in Europe, in Ireland and Britain, etc. And that there's a revival there in Celtic shamanism. Tom Cowan, yeah, good. A book. Um, Exploring African shamanism, Australian, working with, and that's where I learned to play didgeridoo, by the way. I've got about 12 didges down there, just waiting to be playing. Come on, you can breathe easier when you play this.
Mhm.
Anyway, to bring it up to the forefront here, the, how to say this, I am absolutely grateful that I have been shown, called, directed to do these kind of trainings so that I can serve. And I continue to be reminded, that about purpose. Two words, purpose and service.
Mhm.
So I'm really clear about my purpose. I was told healer, teacher, and also to inspire. And inspire, the word itself means to bring spirit in.
Mhm.
So, and interesting, we talk about breath as inspiring, taking a nice, deep, full breath. So we're breathing spirit in. Yeah, it's just a way. I'd like you all to try that sometime, and see what.
Mhm.
And then, so as a teacher and as a healer, that's changed. I was a professor for a while at a 2-year community college, taught some things there. So I've had a lot of great experiences that, and I can see now, at this stage of my life too, that it's all been led. It's a matter of whether I say yes to what is been inspiring me, whatever
Mm-hmm.
it may be, whether it's a dream or another human being or a book that I've read or anything like that. And I encourage everybody who's listening, Sarah, is allow yourself uh, I know I said being led, but another way to say it is pay attention to what you're called to do. It's that whisper in the ear just before you go to sleep at night. When
Mm-hmm.
you wake up, or signs and symbols that are shown to us that we have the excuse me, we have that open awareness to pay attention to these. And as I'm sure we'll talk about, the various ways that you can receive guidance. It's available. And I feel very strongly, Sarah, about this. World's kind of crazy right now.
Oh, yeah.
So how do we manage through this insanity, that's occurring without hooking into it? And I got to say, the answer is very simple. It takes some work and some practice, but is learn how to receive guidance from spirit because
Mm-hmm.
it's available all over the place. We just got to learn how to listen more closely and with our bodies, with our ears, with our minds, with our inner sight, etc. So that's where I'm at now, is that I'm out to teach that. And all of my books and oracle cards, etc., are really designed for that. I wrote about 4 books as a therapist, and one I revived, and it's about trauma, interestingly enough, without calling it trauma. That first book, 30 years ago, 30 plus years ago, adult children of abusive parents. And so I
Mm-hmm.
decided to put out an anniversary, 25th anniversary edition of that. And it's still selling. Some of it might be dated by now, to be quite honest, but I think the guts of the book is that there are exercises that you can do that help heal the trauma. It's still,
Mm-hmm.
my point being is, as a therapist, 4 books, a big 10-year gap, and then bingo, started introduced to shamanism and shamanic practice. And as you put it, it's like a synergy between the two kinds of trainings. It just can't avoid it. It's kind of intertangled or um, connected to and congruent with one another. I'm not saying that very well, but um, both of them are very effective depending, and it's up to me to pay attention to what is it the client needs. When the client tells me this, and then things start to happen in our relationship to where I begin to get cues and a sense of what direction to take this,
Mm-hmm.
ask the client's agreement, etc. I love it, and it brings us up to date, I guess, to do things like this, to pass along some of the information that I've gleaned over the years and encourage people to learn how to receive guidance from spirit, to put it very
Mm-hmm.
simply, and also how to deal with some of the post traumatic residuals that are maybe blocking that receptivity that's available to us. And so, fine tuning that awareness so that we're able to pay attention pretty much all the time, to what's being presented to us. That's where I'm at, Sarah.
Stephen, thank you so much for sharing a part of your journey. I think this now listeners know why I'm so excited to have you on the show, because there's just so much wealth that you bring to the table on so many levels. And while you were talking, I was like, oh, what's the very first thing we're now talking about? Because there's so much, like we could continue. And I think the very first thing I'd love to dive into is the trauma. And particularly because you mentioned somatic exercises, I love to explore the connection between physical symptoms and emotions that are stuck, stored in our bodies over time. And specifically, I'd love to talk about certain common conditions that a lot of people deal with, whether it's like chronic fatigue, IBS, migraines, or just like back pains. I feel like these are all lots of physical symptoms that are indicators. So I'd love to talk about, for people maybe who are even like new to this concept, that our physical symptoms give us hints about our emotions that want to be released.
Yeah, glad to, Sarah, and thank you for your kind comments as well. I appreciate that, and appreciate you having me. Thank you for inviting me as a guest here. Yeah, the first thing I would say about something like that is, yeah, go check with the doctor. Just see what's going on, and someone you feel you can trust. There are naturopaths that, yeah, I'm sure you can find. I'm not saying only naturopaths, but certainly that I think I would recommend that. Check out. The reason for that is that there are other things that a naturopath can offer that often you won't find with an allopathic or, say, a regular physician. That's not to denigrate that. They bring their skills, and it's fine to consult with. I have both. I've been to a naturopath, and I've got a primary. Just,
Mm-hmm.
mostly it's just in case, and I take a lot of supplements based on recommendations, etc., because there are other ways, to treat these conditions from that perspective. Of what do you put into your body? Number one, and second is, what is your body telling you? I'm looking at this card I drew earlier. I'm sorry I got distracted here just briefly, but it's from Power Animal Oracle cards, and I use those periodically with clients too. And this one I just smacked me in the forehead last night. I drew it in relation to what we're going to be talking about today
Mm-hmm.
from the Power Animal Oracle cards, and it was like, of course, gratitude, gratitude. Be grateful for all you are blessed with. Anyway, I think what we're faced with here, there's a lot of turmoil in the world. There is a lot of changes that are going on in the planet. We're seeing it, we're experiencing it. It's kind of scary, but you don't need to live in fear. That's not helping. What is helping is to recognize the fear, or like I often say, is I'll go there, but I don't want to stay there.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I know that that's what's coming up, but I don't want to stay there. So I do what I can to move out of that. And the best thing to do is to be able to sustain and develop and sustain in that order relationships with spirit guides.
Mm-hmm.
There's African societies I came across, and I wish I could remember the names of them, but they believe that to talk directly to God or spirit, it's too big. Let's say God. That's just too big. So instead, they work with intermediaries, often ancestors,
Mm-hmm.
benevolent ancestors. I'll qualify it. I take that step further and say, I look out the window here and there are trees. Can a tree teach me? Can I receive a communication from a tree? Is there something that you might say that where something goes bing in my head, like, oh, I got to remember that because that's something I'm working on.
Mm-hmm.
Other sources, and the ones that are just a lot of fun, are animals.
Yes.
Yeah, animals. And I don't mean just domesticated animals, dogs, cats, etc., but animals that we might see. When an animal shows up in an unusual way or repeatedly, there's a big deal. It's a pretty big deal. I see it
Mm-hmm.
a big deal, especially when it's real obvious to you, or you dream about an animal.
Mm-hmm.
Anything like that is a way that you're potentially able to receive a message or guidance of some sort. Even if you were to ask the tree, this tree out here, or that tree, or whatever tree, maybe in your backyard or something, do you have a message for me?
Mm-hmm.
And then pay attention to what you see, hear, feel, and see what the message might be. Go and put your hands on a tree. Put your, with the expression tree huggers.
Oh, I love tree hugging
Yeah,
so much.
good, good. Yeah. Hug a tree and love that
Oh
tree.
yeah.
Give some love to that tree. Look how much they give us. I've got a
Mm-hmm.
there. I take my dog Scout, a 4-year-old lab, And we'll go out. And of course, he's a retriever. So what do? We play retrieve, fetch, throw the ball, bring it back, throw the ball, bring it back. And it's just a lot of fun. And I also have in my car when I'm at the park a big jug of water and also a bowl for him. So right after we're done playing, and he's run quite a bit. He loves to run. I'm not sure I could ever walk him. He's that kind of dog. He just wants to run. So I do that as much as possible. But then I pour some water into the bowl, and he takes up and he drinks most of it. Leaves maybe about a half an inch or an inch of water. And I'll ask him, "Are you done?" And he shows me he's done. I take this and I'll go over to the nearest tree and I'll pour some of the water on the tree. It's a very simple, simple ceremony. So simple. You go, "That's not a ceremony." Yeah, it is. Because I know in my heart of hearts, I can sense the sacredness of this act, even if it's very simple.
Mm.
Pour a little bit of water on the roots of the tree, and I say to this tree, "Thank you, tree, and thank you, tree spirit,
Mm-hmm.
and thank you for receiving my very small offer." And then I just right next to the tree, I pour the rest of the water, and I say, "Thank you, Mother Earth. Thank you for all that you provide, and thank you for helping us treat your body with care and with love." Something like that. I'll say this out loud. And it feels really good to do that. It feels good to think about that.
Mm-hmm.
So I lost track of where I was going with that, but it is something I wanted to share because I think it's people. I wrote a book called Sacred Ceremony. That was one of my first in this genre here. And I, I stress that it doesn't have to be elaborate. There's some amazing ceremonies that people from indigenous communities will bring. And those are spectacular. I participated in them. I've been trained in some of those, but I think the simple ceremony has to do with intention.
Mm-hmm.
That you are connected in some way to spirit, to God, to source. And so then you enact the ceremony in a simple way like the one I just described, and certainly can be more elaborate.
Thank you so much for sharing some guidance how we can connect with spirits, whether it's whether we call it God, whether we look for something that's divine as well as like animal spirits or tree spirits. Because I personally, so I believe in God, but I have lots of friends, lots of clients, lots of people I know that believe in something else. And I always say it's important to believe in something in life, whatever we call it. Because knowing that we get guidance, that we get support, and that we don't need to tackle and handle everything by ourselves is already a release and a relief. That's the very first thing I want to say. And the second thing, I think God, or however we want to call it, shows up in so many different forms every single day. Whether it is a song, a poem, a person, an animal, a tree, or a bus that's passing with a message on. I think like the most important is that we're willing to receive guidance, to receive messages. And I personally think the key to it is being present. Because only when we're present and when we're here, we can see, like obviously when you're passing a road and there are 3 deer in front of you, it's really hard to miss.
Yeah.
But there are so many signs out there that we can only receive when we are really open to the now.
Yeah.
And when I circle it back to my original question, which was the connection between emotions and physical symptoms, like I love that you brought up all the guidance because I also think it's a beautiful way of releasing physical symptoms. So, for example, when someone is struggling with chronic fatigue, if they are open to holistic guidance, like people can say, okay, what spirit can help me with my chronic fatigue, whether it is finding the root cause of what's weighing me down, what's really always like draining my energy.
Good.
Or also spirit that's like, okay, what spirit can lift me up, or what spirit can show me what's actually currently keeping my flame small, that there is nothing that I'm so passionate about that I like, jump out of bed and I'm excited. Or same as when you found that 2-day seminar you talked about, you were so excited and so bubbly, you couldn't wait to like for the next thing. I feel like chronic fatigue often is like a sign as well. Wow, like this really is missing in life. So I think there are so many different ways of asking for guidance. And then when I also come back, because I also mentioned like headaches, um, with headache, and I'm curious what you also say about it. I have noticed with myself, but also with a lot of my clients, it's very often, particularly when it comes to migraines, like to a point where you have to close the curtains, like where you have to lay in bed and there's nothing else you can do. It's very often with people that are so much on the go, doing, also with their mind, thinking about so many things that their body is like, now I am going to put a complete stop to it. You're not going to interact with anyone. You're not going to write any email. I am going to like, you have to withdraw to from the outside to kind of reconnect with yourself.
Mm-hmm.
And another thing I've experienced with headaches, with myself particularly, that was particularly in the beginning when I started to have all like my psychic abilities. I got so often headache. It was insane. But to me, like looking back, totally makes sense. Like with the seventh chakra, I was really like reluctant to receiving this ability. But I've been very fortunate that my family has been so they have always had the language around it. So my mom always said, "Oh, this is because she knew. She was like, "Oh, this is because you're just reluctant to like fully receiving your gifts." And she said, "Take your time, like, and also ask for guidance, like, please, whoever can support me with this, like, give me the courage to receive my gift and give me the courage to share it with the world." I was much, much, much younger back then. But like headache, I think is such a great example as well
Very,
with
yeah.
spirituality, like how it's connected. And then the last thing I also wanted to mention, because a lot of people have digestive issues, whether it's upset tummy or diarrhea or constipation. I think the digestive system is such a great reflection of how much we are willing to release certain things, because I feel like constipation is always like keeping things tight, not wanting to release.
Right.
And also, I think another thing is when it's upset, it's like also like, what is upsetting you so much? Oh, how much stress are you currently experiencing in your life? And I also feel like when it's with constipation, it's often also like there's so much to digest, like not just food, but emotionally, mentally, spiritually, that our body can't really catch up. And yeah, so that's just what I wanted to like to full circle the question of the link between emotion and physical symptoms that I wanted to add.
The word metaphors or
Mm-hmm.
metaphor comes to mind. Is that often there? Let's say, oh man, my neck has been hurting me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Well, what's the metaphor?
Or I can't hear it anymore. It's giving me headache. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Who in my life is a pain in the neck?
Mm-hmm.
Or maybe
Yeah.
so, how am I being a pain in the neck to others?
Yeah.
In some way. So you can play with it a little bit with the words as to
Mm-hmm.
how you describe this, like you said about digestion. What is it you're having trouble swallowing?
Mm-hmm.
What is it that you're having trouble processing, digesting?
Mm-hmm.
There's maybe a lot of information coming in. Maybe it's overloaded. Another would be, how are you stuffing your feelings? If
Mm-hmm.
you're overeating, for instance. So I think that those of you who are listening, well said, Sarah. Also, just think in terms of metaphor. What is the body trying to tell you? and then you can make corrections because it brings it to your awareness in a little different way.
Mhm.
Oh man, my shoulder, it's been sore for so long. I don't know what's going on. Well, I'm trying to carry something pretty heavy.
Mhm.
Again, possible metaphor there. So I like the idea of playing with it, play wordplay,
Mhm.
words. But I also think if you think about metaphors, often that can be very descriptive of the way that you're unconsciously participating in this particular symptom or this particular way that your body is reacting. That's why again we go back to the wisdom of the body too. The body,
Mhm.
not only do we uh, can come to know it as a source of our emotions and our feelings, etc., but what is it that's going on, with this chest pain that I have? It's not
Yeah.
back. I took, cardiologist, did, but I still get this chest pain. I'm feeling some pressure,
Mhm.
you know, and maybe the pressure is, of course, self-induced or self carried along by the self as to how I was just thinking of my own situation. What I told you earlier was there's just a lot to do. You know, I pride myself in the, 7 months now that I've, since I moved here being Oregon, Ashland, Oregon, that my office is cleaned up. And it might have had something to do with accidentally stepping into some bear shit, to put it bluntly, and going, what's the meaning of this? Oh, and the light bulb goes on like in the old cartoons and such.
Mhm.
Here's the insight. And so the body is such an amazing resource. Sarah, I've been one area that I've also been paying attention to here lately because I'm slowly reading this book by Stephen Porges on the polyvagal. He calls it our polyvagal world. And that's the vagus nerve and how it operates. But the takeaway from what I've been reading is how we want to, when we're dissonant, with that sense of safety, is that we do what we can, and the body will instinctively do what it needs to do to create
Mhm.
safety. Either that, or it comes out in aggression. You know,
Mhm.
so I think that's pretty amazing. But the way that um, let me be clear about this. One aspect or um, some aspects of the nerve itself, because it runs through the whole body. Really different way of thinking about the nervous system than what I grew up with. That's for sure. That there's from the back of the cerebellum, there are nerves that go to the face, and the body, in the
Mhm.
gesture you make, and how much communication has to do with the not only the face-to-face communication with another human being or human beings, the face-to-face commit, but how is that responded to? Like you and I are in a connection right now where I'm responding to you and you're responding to me, even on this sort of two-dimensional process
Mhm.
called the internet. But we're still able to discern or see the I see your eyes, I see your facial expressions. So we're both socially engaged. Why? Because we feel safe.
Mhm.
Whereas if I said something to you and you went, I don't think so, Stephen. In fact, I'd rather change the subject, or something like
Mhm.
that. Suddenly there's a dissonance.
Mhm.
Ideally, we return to more of that connection. I trust that I'm saying it to some degree where it's understandable, but
100%.
we're made for social engagement. And back when, that's why we hung out with our tribe
Mhm.
to create safety, because there was a lot of dangers in the world and predators, and rocks falling and fires burning and such like that. So with all this happening, how do we still safe, especially if we just stand alone? No, not good. Not good.
Mhm.
It doesn't work very well. People have done it, but it doesn't work very well. So that social engagement, especially this time of year, or excuse me, as we enter into the new year, This is kind of a newness that I want people to take with them is, yeah, get with your friends, call somebody, make
Mhm.
contact, that kind of thing. Stay in touch. If you need a break, you can take a break. Walk outside, go put your bare feet on the land.
Mhm.
This time of year, though, you'd be freezing your feet. So I'm not sure. In the southern hemisphere,
Yeah, I was about to say, depending where you live.
yeah, where you live, yeah. But you also get, interestingly enough, either barefoot or leather-soled shoes. Mother Earth is constantly feeding you antioxidants
Mhm.
that take care of the oxidation that the body naturally experiences just by living. So I'm a real proponent of that. When it's warmer, of course, get outside on the land. Get outside on the land anyway. I don't care if you're wearing rubber boots. Get
Mhm.
outside on the land. Connect with the tree, like you said. You're a tree hugger.
Yeah, totally.
There, you'd be amazed at if is a physical condition that's going on. How even just go outside, look at the stars,
Mhm.
connect with them. Hopefully, you won't see those lights that were buzzing around, last year around New Jersey and such. But anyway, it doesn't matter. That's a bit of an aside. I just think it's really important that we remember our relationship with the land and all
Mhm.
things of the land. Because, and I feel sad when I say this, I think Western civilization, particularly, is we've forgotten, how to do that. And that's part of, I think, an important part of this awakening process. Not just connecting with guides. Yes, that's important, like we're talking about, or connecting with God, staying in alignment, congruent with God and God's will, as much as we possibly can. But also to be able to remember that that tree there is another being that has a life force.
Mhm.
And you can connect with the life force in very simple ways, hugging the tree, putting your hand on the tree. Left hand, receive,
Mhm.
if you're right handed. Left hand, receive, and then right hand, take a breath and give the tree love. Give the tree gratitude, express your,
Mhm.
like I was saying about the pouring ceremony that I got through after
Mhm.
my dog. And I think that's really important these days because the world's like, not to keep dwelling on it. I don't want to dwell on it because that's not the point, but just there's a lot of fragmentation that's going on, a lot of dissension, a lot of division. And I know I've been told, well, let me tell you what I do. I just describe this briefly. It is I've kept a journal, an online journal uh, and I found some old journals too, on the days when we didn't have computers. Even when I was quite younger, I would, keep journals. I have a bunch of spiral notebooks with them. But anyway, the last, probably about the last dozen years or so, I keep a daily journal, rarely miss it. Sit down, put the date down, write the date, and then just put a little bit of information. This is what's going on. This is what happened. Blah, 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 just like a diary. And then the second part, though, is where it gets fun. And I encourage people to try this out. Then I close my eyes as I'm doing now, and I pay attention to what's going in my body, which I'm aware of. I feel sort of a lightness in my legs. My feet are on the ground. I breathe. And then the best way I describe it, Sarah, is my hands start writing.
Mm. It's called automatic writing,
Yeah.
actually.
Yes.
Mhm.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a good way to put it.
Yeah.
And what's going on though is I'm connecting often with who I call the teacher.
Mhm.
It could be the ancestors or a spirit guide or anything like that. And then I didn't think about the automatic writing though. Thank you for that. It really is. I think of it automatic writing like this, like I'm
Mhm.
pen on a piece of paper. But you're right. So in this automatic writing, I receive messages and guidance, and I think it's a good exercise to do that in the morning, whether you do it pen and paper or
Mhm.
put it on the computer. But I want everybody who's listening, start a journal, and try this out. Try it for about 2 weeks and see how it works. Uh, Conversations with God comes to mind. Neil Donald.
Mhm.
There's whatever again you call that force. It's that that animates everything.
Hmm. I like one word that really resonated with me that you mentioned is connection and safety. And I know you talked about connection with spirit, connection, relationship with other people. The way I see it is we feel the safest when we are connected with ourselves, when
Hmm.
our body, mind, and soul connection is strong, connected with God, connected with Mother Earth, with nature, connected with animals, connected with people, connected to our purpose. So I feel the biggest safety comes from connection. When we feel unsafe, whether it is, feeling stressed, feeling overwhelmed, feeling angry, frustrated, whatever it is, heartbroken, grief, there is a sense of um, disconnection. Although
Yeah.
I must say, ever since I read a book by Paulo Coelho, I love to call it, rather than disconnection, I love to call it distraction.
Hmm.
He said in the book, we are never disconnected. We are merely distracted.
Hmm. I like that.
And it's something that I'll never forget. When I read that, I was like, wow. And so whenever I feel stressed or I feel unsafe or unsettled, or a client of mine, I always say, okay, let's pause for a second. Like, what are the distractions in our life? And that actually was one of the reasons that inspired me to tell other people and also myself to do a weekly energy audit. I always suggest doing it like on a Wednesday or Thursday, not in the beginning or at the end of the week, but like in the middle of the week. Because you know how some people are like, oh, it's Wednesday, the week is already gone, like it's the tone is already set. I want to like, no, do it in the middle of the week. It's never too late to change the tone of the week. And what I mean with energy audit is you can write it down, or you can go, for a walk with your dog, talk about it, or talk to a friend about it, however you feel comfortable that week to do it. I usually also set a reminder because, sometimes when you're very busy, we might forget. And if there's a reoccurring reminder, that's great. But to describe it simply is you have the plus and the minus. The pluses are energy givers. The minus is anything that drains your energy. These are the distractions.
Right.
Distractions, it can be certain foods, sugars, it can be alcohol, it can be drugs, it can be even a certain type of music or a certain habit or a certain person, a certain generational pattern, like anything. And
Right.
all the pluses, it can be as simple as, oh, in the morning, I make my bed. Or it can be something big. Oh, it gives me so much energy when I do the automatic writing every morning. I think it's a great way to get to know yourself, because over time you will see there are certain parallels each week. Things that are usually on the plus side and things that are usually on the minus side.
Mm. Well stated. Well stated. I like that. I like that.
So, yeah, so that's what I wanted to say with connection and disconnection. And you can also say what helps, what feeds and fuels my connection, and what leads to distraction.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's a dear friend of mine who describes something very similar, and she uses a word, and I love words. I'm a word.
Me
Yeah,
too.
you too, I can tell. But is whether you're coherent or
Hmm.
coherent. And I like that, and what she's describing is whether you're in alignment, so to speak,
Yeah.
with God,
Hmm.
Great Spirit, whatever. But let's stop that. Let's call it God. That's fine.
Hmm.
When you're in alignment with it, then there's a coherence. There's a coherence to your behavior and the way you act and the way you feel, etc.
Hmm.
But when you're distracted, and I like that term rather than disconnected, then you're in a state of incoherence, kind of like uh, sometimes when I sing and I miss the notes.
Hmm. Which in my case would be all the time.
It does happen on occasion. Anyway, um, I got to tell you something that I believe is in line with what we're talking about here. And I don't know if there's more to say about the body and the expressions of the body, that are manifestations of some underlying emotional pattern or something that's not attended to, something that's not taken care of. But yes, the body speaks. In fact,
Mhm.
there's a book by Bessel van der Kolk, K-O-L-K, Van der Kolk, called The Body
Mhm.
Keeps Score. I love the title. I highly recommend it. It has to do with how the body seeks regulation, in all these various ways, and the things that can interfere with that. And quite frankly, some of the conditions that we might face, the physical conditions that are don't keep us, full of vitality, etc., like that. Um, Something to look into is that they could be, I want to say, trauma based,
Mhm.
meaning you still may be carrying the results or the consequences of a trauma that was never addressed, nor could it have been. Trauma, the whole thing with trauma is fairly new. It's fairly recent in our history to really understand, what happens when we have to adapt to a traumatic situation. And the good news, even in shamanism, there's ways to do shamanic healing with something like that. And I'll give you
Mhm.
one example. Another avenue to go is something called soul loss. Interesting word, isn't it? Or two words. It isn't technically based on the practice I do, and I think it's fairly common, across cultures, is that an aspect of your soul leaves when you're traumatized. It's like it goes, I'm out of here, kind of a dissociative process if we look at it from the psychological angle. But it's not just dissociation. Hi there, Scout.
Oh,
Let me
I
go back.
love how see when there is I always feel like there's no coincidence when animals come close. They're like, we want to be part of this conversation.
Absolutely, yeah. And he goes back and lays down, just checking in, making sure. So let's say at 7 years old, your parents had a big argument, and not necessarily that you were physically abused, but then your mother got to be very upset with you, and said some nasty things to you because you're a vulnerable child, because you're also a sensitive human being. Because some people, I think, are born more with that sensitivity. That goes in, and it's like it catches you. So there's a part of you that leaves from this paradigm. And that part we're going to call a soul piece or a soul aspect. Now, you could look at it from another lens as dissociation, but it's a different kind of dissociation from a shamanic paradigm, is that it actually leaves. And if there's safety that appears after the incident that prompted the soul loss or the soul leaving, then it may return. Go, okay, I'm back. But what happens, and I've experienced this many, many times, Sarah, is it doesn't want to come back. It's
Mhm.
like sitting there out in the woods going, I ain't going back there. You got to be
Mhm.
crazy. It's just a crazy household. So my job when it's presented to me and the client, and I just get this hit that this could be an effective process, and they're not too wigged out about shamanism, then I would propose that to them, that we could do a soul retrieval. It's one of the most fascinating things because I will then travel to that soul piece. I don't know where it is, but that soul piece will show up in my journey. The shamanic journey is where you send your consciousness, if you will, into non-ordinary reality. And in this case, with intention, I want to discover where that soul piece is, find them, talk with them, see if I can persuade them to come back. That's my whole mission. So the soul piece, okay, I'm conjuring up a vision here, sitting on a rock in the woods because it feels very, very safe and has a companion spirit animal with them, one on each side, for safety, taking care of them. I usually engage. No, it's not usually. I always engage in conversation. So hey, how you doing? What's happened? Why did you leave, etc. So then after a conversation, I ask him, I'd like to have you come back with me. Oh, I don't want to go back. Well, she's ready for you. A lot's changed, since you left. She's 35 years old now. She's a lot of life, and she's very eager to have you back because she can feel the loss.
Mm-hmm.
So then they etherically, of course, accompany me back, and then I do an installation process. So sounds so unusual to call it installation, but that's what it is. Is to rejoin the overall soul aspect of the
Mm-hmm.
individual, and it's an amazing healing process. And then there's an integration that occurs over the next few weeks.
Stephen, for those who are new to a practice like this, could you share a story of one of your clients, obviously without mentioning their names, maybe someone that had, you know, physical symptom, like whether it's a severe illness or something chronic, where a part of their soul basically left them at a certain point. And by integrating that part back, it led to a big sense of physical healing.
Sure. The What comes to mind is along the lines of what I was, shall we say, making up, is the 7-year-old or 8-year-old that's sitting in the woods, protected by two spirit animals. I think it was a wolf spirit on one side, and then I believe it was, yeah, it was eagle spirit comes to my mind's eye. So, um, why did you leave? Because I thought I was going to die. What made you think you're going to die? Because she was really sick.
Hmm.
So you left because you thought she was going to die. Yeah, yeah. And I ain't going to go back because I really I like being alive or connected with somebody that has a human body and is alive, and I'm part of her. So somehow I would be lost in the whole process. So I figured it's a lot better if I just go ahead and leave now. Okay. Well, I got news for you. Um, what's that? She's actually doing quite well and is recovering, from a pretty serious illness. Really? Yeah, it's taken a while, but I know from the fact that she's approached me that she's really ready to have you come back. Oh, so would you be willing to come back with me? And there's you have what you bring with her. It's like you were doing when I came up on you. You were dancing or doing some kind of movement. You bring with her the joy that has been missing from her life for a long time. I get emotional just talking about this.
Mm.
She's okay. So then my next question is something like this. And what do you want from her? I want I want her to dance more. She's able
Mm.
to do so now, and I love dancing. She loves dancing too, but she's not done that for a long time. And I really miss that about her. Okay. I'll tell you what, I can't promise you, but I will, I'll do my best to persuade her to dance more. And you know what? I got a feeling she will because she wants to get better too. And as I've explained to her, and she knows now, I, I wasn't sure this is who I would come for, but this is the one. You are the one that most needs to be returned right now. That's my request. And that's what I'm being shown here. So tell you what, come on, let's go. Then we journey back into ordinary reality where my client is. And then I tell her, well, actually, I go through a process. I don't know, can't think of a better word, but I install her.
Hmm.
And that is by blowing at the top of the head and then into the heart. And then I look her right in the eyes, especially her left eye. That's the soul side.
Mm-hmm.
And I say, once it was like click is the best way I describe it. Just where the congruence that takes place between me and her and the soul piece that's now been installed and is with her. And then I just simply say, welcome back. Then I tell the client the story. And she says, oh, yeah, I used to dance when I was little.
Wow. Mm-hmm.
How's that? So then I tell her, well, guess what? You want to keep her around. She will be reassured by you dancing, not necessarily going out ballroom, it's not that, but just turn up some music and dance.
Mm-hmm.
So that's a good example. And the result.
May I ask, this particular client of yours, what physical symptom did she have?
She was the physical symptom I would call dissociation. She didn't feel in her body so much.
Mm-hmm.
She felt something was going on with her legs, which makes sense now. And I think
With the
about
dancing. Mm-hmm.
with the dancing, like she had. It was her feet. I'm just seeing her feet as I look away over here. Her feet tended to wasn't just her feet. There was a lot of cramping that was going
Mm-hmm.
with the muscles. And if you think about the link there, that makes absolute sense.
100%.
Loose, you got to be kind of loose when you dance.
Mm-hmm.
You got to be somewhat free spirited, so to speak. So, excuse me. The result is that it took probably a week or so, but the latest report from after that I got was that she was now able to dance and she was fulfilling the soul's request or the soul
Mm-hmm.
request to dance more. And it was a sense of loss in that her feet were expressing that, with
Mm-hmm.
the tightness. Now you could say, well, they're cramps, there's other ways. Yeah, you could do that too, and see what happens. But I think this one stays or sticks. This kind
Mm-hmm.
of feeling sticks more. And another one was I just flashed on was like a pain or discomfort in her heart, and she'd had it checked out and her heart's fine and all that, but she still experienced that kind of pain. And you can take it from there, as a metaphor, of
Mm-hmm.
the loss as well, that her heart was broken. So that's an example of what soul retrieval, how it's related to physical symptoms, and also as dare I say, a cure for those symptoms. And
Mm-hmm.
I heard she's doing fine, and she's dancing, which is great. Reminds me of another story, but I'll hold that for a bit.
Guys, this is a wrap for the very first part of our conversation. And if you love this, you will be so excited for next week. You really need to tune in to not miss out on this wisdom. And we see you next Wednesday.